Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 2nd of April of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, both the Russians and the Ukrainians once again attacked each other with significant number of drones. The Ukrainians, according to information we have, used around 160 drones to attack the territory of Russia. There were several waves of attacks. It seems that Ukrainians were trying to distract Russian attention before launching the main strike. And according to information we have, the main strike, the main attack took place in the direction of the central part of Russia, and the Ukrainians attacked the settlement of Ufa. And according to media, according to local sources, the Ukrainians attacked the Ufa oil refinery, and here we can see probably first seconds or the first minutes after the attack that was carried out by Russians. We have a very big fire. Here we can see the same Ufa oil refinery, but from another angle, and here we can see the same story. Huge black smoke over the refinery, and it seems that the Ukrainians managed to deal a significant damage to this territory. We need to wait for additional updates and for probably additional satellite pictures, and then we will understand whether the Ukrainians indeed managed to damage this oil refinery significantly or they missed the target. The Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones, and this morning, for example, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that overnight the Russians used 172 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. Lots of explosions were recorded in the area of Odessa region overnight. So here we have the video of how the special forces of Ukraine were trying to stabilize the situation on the territory of the Ilyichevsk port infrastructure. So as you can see, several containers and barracks were destroyed by Russians as a result of Geraint strike, and here we can see the aftermath of this Geraint strike in the Odessa region. Several barracks and warehouses most likely were completely destroyed. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dnipropetrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, this territory was also attacked by Russians, and the Russians attacked the city of Pavlograd. In this picture, we can see the first seconds after the Russians hit a chemical plant on the territory of the settlement. Very heavy explosion, and the author of this video and this picture and several sources, experts stated that the Ukrainians used the chemical plants on the territory of the city of Pavlograd for military purposes. They used this plant for production of fuel for missiles and drones that the Ukrainians used to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. Lots of explosions took place in the Dnipro region, in the Donetsk region. The Russians were attacking the cities of Kramatorsk and Slaviansk, trying to hit and to destroy temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine. But probably the most important video is coming from the settlement of Gusarovka. Here we can see pictures, and according to these pictures, the Russians destroyed another train on the territory of Ukraine. We know that trains on the territory of Ukraine are very expensive and very important assets due to power outages and problems with logistics and with electricity lines. So the locomotives are very important asset, and now the Russians, we see, started a real hunt on these assets, trying to destroy the locomotives of Ukraine. No matter the price and cost, they'll pay for this, because the Russians understand every single destroyed locomotive on the territory of Ukraine means that Ukrainians will have huge problems with logistics on this or that part of the front line. The Kharkiv direction. During the previous 24 hours, lots of drones and lots of explosions were recorded. The Russians attacked the area around the settlement of Zmiev, and here we can see a Geraint drone strike and a very heavy explosion. So the Russians are saying that they attacked either an object of energy infrastructure or an object of a military infrastructure. The city of Kharkiv. Lots of videos were published during the previous nights, during the previous day, and most of them, as the Russians were attacking attacking with drones different parts of the city of Kharkiv. And later, the local sources published this picture or this video where we can see a train that was damaged and destroyed as a result of overnight attack that was carried out by Russians. So very difficult to say when exactly this train was damaged and destroyed, but the local sources are saying that over the previous night. So we see that the Russians indeed are hunting for Ukrainian drones, operators, and Ukrainian trains and locomotives. And there were lots of explosions on the territory of the northern parts of Ukraine. An explosion took place on the territory of the city of Chernigov. The local sources stated that the Russians attacked the city with the Iskander missile. We have explosions and the consequences in the area of the settlement of Bondari, and the Russians attacked the city of Shostka. So as you can see, there are differences between attacks that the Ukrainians carry out and the Russians. The Ukrainians are trying to use hundreds of drones just with one purpose, to attack an oil refinery through the territory of Russia, maybe with 3, 4, 5 drones. The Russians are using almost the same time, the same number of drones, but the Russians are trying to attack hundreds of targets on the territory of Ukraine. But despite these two completely different tactics, we see that the Russians are not doing one thing, and they haven't done this since the beginning of the special military operation even once. We're talking about bridges through the territory of the river of Dnipro. We believe that this is a very important question, and we ask ourselves this question so many times that we stop doing this because we don't have answer to this question. Nobody has answer to this question. And you know that today a very interesting example, or how to call this, was published and was shown from the area of the Middle East. Today, according to different sources, the coalition attacked a bridge that is located to the northwest of the city of Tigran, on the area of the Tigran agglomeration. In this video, we can see exactly the moments when the coalition attacked this bridge. As you can see, after this attack, the bridge was almost completely destroyed. At least we see that from this perspective and from this level of destruction. Most likely the Iranians will not be able to use this bridge, at least until the end of the conflict on the territory through the Middle East, but obviously also within the next 1 or 2 years, because it will take time to repair it. So, and as we know, the United States of America is something like trendsetters, at least when talking about military action. So after the destruction of this bridge in the city of Tigran, it seems that the Russians might review and change their positions regarding bridges along the river of Dnipro as well. So anyway, we need to wait to understand whether this is going to happen or not, but I would like to remind you once again that several days ago the Russians issued an ultimatum to Ukraine to remove forces from the area of Donbas within the next 2 months, or then the Russians will change their demands regarding the peaceful settlement of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the northern directions. During the previous days, we see that the Russians have improved their positions significantly. The Russians improved their positions significantly in the most northern parts of Sumy region. We have lots of changes. We have received lots of changes since the beginning of this year, and basically all these changes that you can see right now in front of your screens, we have received since the beginning of this year, and we see that the Russians are keeping advancing. As for the Sumy direction itself, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special was recorded. The Russians are attacking the settlement of Kondratyevka using drones and using all means they have to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this territory. And during the previous 24 hours, no changes were recorded in this area, but we know that the Russians are keeping advancing, at least from 4 directions. The Kharkiv region. During the previous 24 hours, the biggest number of updates we received exactly from this area. The Russians are keeping advancing along the river of Seversky Donets, and the Russians improved their position significantly around the settlement of Verkhny Pisarevka over the previous 2 days. So these are the changes on the ground between the previous 2 days, and we see that the Russians of the group of forces north are keeping advancing. Furthermore, the Russians improved their position significantly in the biggest forest between the Volchansk foothold and the most northeastern parts of the settlement of the Kharkiv region. So these are the changes between the previous 2 days, and we see that the Russians answered this huge forest, and now the Russians are keeping advancing further with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area without any chances to return this territory under complete control in the future. So the situation for Ukrainians is very difficult in this area as well, and very difficult to say how the Ukrainians are planning to stabilize the situation. Another important area is the territory in the most eastern parts of Kharkiv region. Here we can see that the Russians are keeping advancing as well. The Russians are moving towards the settlement of Vilkhovatka. Additional changes on the ground were recorded overnight, and these are the changes. Furthermore, the Russians are keeping advancing towards the villages of Grigorovka and Kolodezhnya, and it seems that the Russians during this stage of the Kharkiv offensive operation are tasked to establish complete control over these territories. Then the Russians are planning to use these forces for additional accumulation of their units with the purpose to move further in the western direction, both in the direction of the city of Veliki Burluk and with the purpose to outflank the city of Kupiansk, somewhere in the area of the settlements of Novo Burluk and Veliki Khutari. So the Kharkiv offensive operation is going to be a primary offensive for the Russians, because the Russians right now are tasked not just to establish control over these territories, but to move the Ukrainian missile forces deeper and to create a bigger gap between the launching sites of Ukraine and the objects of energy infrastructure and civil infrastructure of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Slaviansk direction. Overnight, we received lots of updates from this area. The Russians are using drones to attack the territory and positions of Ukraine, trying to force them to fall back, trying to destroy as many as possible strongholds and in this direction. But as for the previous 24 hours, almost no changes were recorded, just small advance was recorded along the MO3 road that was reported by a neutral mapper. As for the Konstantinovka direction, these days the Russians have improved their position significantly. Almost every second day we adjust the map in the Russian favor, and this is the way how the map has been adjusted since the beginning or since the end of the March of 2026. The Russians are about to break through Ukraine's defense and resistance in the southwestern parts of the settlement, which will be something like the beginning of collapse of the entire defenses through the city. So the Russians, it seems, will finish the battle for the southwestern and the southern parts of the city of Konstantinovka, it seems that in coming days. The Dobropolye direction, probably nothing special was recorded. The Zaporozhye direction, the most important updates are coming from the northern Zaporozhye direction, where according to different sources, the Russians have begun the Zaporozhye northern counter-offensive operation, and during the previous days, the Russians managed to force the Ukrainians to fall back from significant number of territories to the south of the river of Volcha. The Russians most likely will continue offensive operation, and it seems that in coming days, weeks, we will color the gray zone and contested area back under complete control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, because the Russians are tasked to improve their flanks in the Zaporozhye direction before the Russians enter the major parts, the main parts of the Zaporozhye offensive operation that includes the cities of Orekhov itself and of course the outskirts and the limits around the city of Zaporozhye itself. Right now we have covered most of the updates regarding the situation in Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation in the Middle East. And first, of course, let's talk about the Russian Federation. During the previous day, we received lots of updates that the president of Russia had lots of talks, lots of conversations with different leaders of the Middle East. For example, we received a report that Putin and Saudi Arabia's crown prince discussed the Middle East crisis. The Kremlin reported the leaders noted that problems with the production and transportation of energy resources are negatively affecting global energy security. Also, the president of Russia had a conversation with the leaders of Egypt. For example, Vladimir Putin stated at a meeting with the Egyptian foreign minister that Russia is ready to do everything possible to bring the situation in the Middle East back to normal. So as you can see, the schedule of the president of the Russian Federation was filled with conversation with the leaders from the Middle East. And the leaders of the Middle East were calling and were trying to have a meeting with the president of Russia just because of one thing. Because during the previous nights, the president of the United States of America made too many statements. He made too many statements, and these statements are telling us just about one thing, that the United States of America are going to return or to move the Iranians to the area of the Stone Age. For example, the president of the United States of America stated that we are going to hit the Iranians extremely hard over the next 2-3 weeks. We are going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. So this statement is, for example, when talking about Saudi Arabia, when talking about United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, this statement sounds for them completely differently. For example, if the president of the United States of America says that we are going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2-3 weeks, for the states of the Persian Gulf sounds as following. The Iranians, as retaliatory strikes, are going to hit the states of the Persian Gulf extremely hard over the next 2-3 weeks. And if the president of the United States of America says that they're going to bring the Iranians back to the Stone Ages, when talking about the states of the Persian Gulf, these statements sounds for them as the Iranians are going to bring the states of the Persian Gulf back to the Stone Ages as well. So, and of course, the states of the Middle East understand that this is not an option, and they were talking a lot with the president of the United States of America with the purpose to stabilize the situation in this area. They were trying to convince the president of states to start the ground operation. They tried to convince him to stop operation, but not to destroy the entire infrastructure of this region. So that is why they are calling the president of Russia, Putin, probably trying to convince the president of Russia, or using the tools that the president of Russia has to convince the president of the United States of America not to do this. Because when the president of states was talking about Stone Ages in about 2-3 weeks, we saw a very, very bad picture. We saw how the oil prices were spiking. So here we can see how the oil prices were developing during hours, during the day, and when the president of the United States of America began talking about Stone Ages, we see that the oil prices have rose significantly. And this is exactly the situation. For example, yesterday oil prices and oil market closed on the level of $99.88 per barrel for WTI. Brent had the price of $101 per barrel. And when the president of states began talking all these things about Stone Ages, the prices for oil were grown significantly. For example, right at the moment when he just started his speech, the WTI WTI rose to the level of $105 per barrel, almost $106. Brent rose till the level of almost $108 per barrel. And when the Trump finished, that wasn't the final price. The prices for oil continued growing, and almost before I started making this video, the oil prices for WTI were on the level of $111. So the prices for oil rose for more than 10% just within a day, which means that the expectations of investors and traders are very bad regarding the Middle East, and now they're trying to purchase and to buy as many as possible cheap oil, because $111 per barrel, according to their understanding, is a cheap price for oil today, because later the prices are going to be much higher when considering the words that were made by the President of the United States of America. And of course, the previous day wasn't an exception in the Middle East conflict. We received lots of videos, lots of updates about strikes that were carried out by the coalition. In this video, we can see how one of the biggest ammo depots was destroyed on the territory of the Middle East. But this is something that we have seen many times since the beginning of the conflict. The most important thing, as I told you, is the moments that the coalition destroyed this bridge in the area of the Tehran agglomeration, which means that objects like this will be attacked even more in the coming days in the future, which means that in coming days most likely the Iranians will destroy several bridges in the area of the Middle East. And you know that the coalition destroyed the bridge in the Tehran agglomeration, but imagine yourself what is going to happen if the Iranians somehow destroy the bridge between the state of Bahrain and the state of Saudi Arabia. We're talking about ATM road. This is going to be the biggest collapse probably of the entire Middle East area, and now the Iranians are not tightened, their hands are free to do this because they will mirror the actions of the coalition. And this is exactly what the Middle East states and their leaders realized during the previous days. And now they're trying to find the help and trying to find a way how to resolve these problems through the president of Russia. Of course, we'll see whether this situation is going to work or not, but one thing is clear, that 2-3 weeks with this pace of attacks will lead to the situation with $150 per barrel, and the Russians maybe will be the last states in the world who will be interested in the resolving or stabilization of the conflict in this region. And that's it for today. The Military with Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.